Heroes of the City of Man, pages 213 to 227. Patria and Paitas. Virgil, the Aeneid. Homer had many imitators in antiquity, but no rivals. The Iliad and Odyssey were far and away the dominant literary works of the Greek world. It must have seemed arrogant then, when around 30 BC the poet Propertius wrote that something greater than the Iliad is in the making. He was referring to the work of his fellow poet, Publius Virgilius Maro, the author of the epic poem we now know as the Aeneid. Despite his audacity, Virgil, which is the English version of his name, did show some humility before Homer, his acknowledged master, for the Aeneid consists of only 12 books, in comparison with the Homeric 24. Virgil aspired to write an epic on the same scale as the Homeric poems, and even Virgil's story is itself indebted to Homer. Continuing the story of the Trojan War, the Aeneid traces the fortunes of Aeneid, a Trojan prince who escapes when Troy is destroyed by the Greeks. Encouraged by prophecies, Aeneas sets out to find a new Troy, though he makes a series of false starts along the way, most dramatically during an extended dalliance with Queen Dido of Carthage in North Africa. Finally, he arrives in Italy. King Latinus has been told that his daughter, Lavinia, will be given in marriage to a foreigner, and he determines that Aeneas is a fulfillment of his hopes. The decision of Latinus enrages Turnus, an Italian prince who has been one of Lavinia's suitors, and he attacks the Trojans. Aeneas eventually leads the Trojans to victory, and the epic ends with Aeneas defeating Turnus in single combat. Virgil, moreover, organized his poem as a retelling of the Homeric epics in reverse order. The Aeneid is divided into two halves, whose beginnings are clearly marked by invocations of the Muse, goddess of poetry. Book 1 begins with the proem that refers to the Muses, and near the beginning of Book 7, Virgil again invokes the Muses' aid. Be with me, Muse of all desire, Erato, while I call up the kings at early times, how matters stood in the old land of Latium, that day when the foreign soldiers beached upon Ausonia's shore, and the events that led to the first fight, immortal one. Bring all in memory to the singer's mind, for I must tell of wars to chill the blood, ranked men in battle, kings by their own valor, driven to death, Eetria's cavalry, and Hesperia mobilized in arms. A greater history opens before my eyes, a greater task awaits me. It was as if Virgil is starting a new epic with Book 7. And that, in a sense, is precisely what he is doing. The plot of Books 1 through 6 follows the Odyssey quite closely. Aeneas makes his entry into the action during a storm at sea, and his first words are a lament. Triply lucky, all you men, to whom death came before your father's eyes. Below the wall at Troy, bravest Danaan. Diomedes, why could I not go down, when you had wounded me and lose my life on Ilium's battlefield? On his way from Calypso's island to the land of the Phaeacians, Odysseus also encountered a storm at sea and wished he could have died at Troy. 4 times blessed, my friends in arms, who died on the plains of Troy those years ago, serving the sons of Atreus to the end. Would to God I'd die there too, and met my fate that day, the Trojan swarms of them hurled at me with bronze spears, fighting over the corpse of proud Achilles. Shortly after his lament, Odysseus swam ashore and found himself among the Phaeacians, as Aeneas would be blown onto the shores of Carthage. Odysseus recounted his adventures to the Phaeacians, and Aeneas will tell the story of his journey to Queen Dido. As Odysseus lingered to take his pleasure with Calypso and Circe, so Aeneas will dally with Dido for some time, as the queen falls passionately in love with him. Like his Greek counterpart, this Roman Odysseus cannot remain where he is. He must move on to his new home. Virgil employs these similarities in part to highlight the differences of situation. Generally, the parallels with Odysseus heighten the pathos of Aeneas. Unlike Odysseus's, Aeneas's journey is not a nostos, a return. Aeneas has no home to return to, but instead must journey to a place he has never known. Specific allusions function in a similar way. Even the two laments quoted above have a very different tone. Aeneas regrets that he did not die in his homeland before the eyes of his fathers along with his comrades. Odysseus regrets that he missed a hero's funeral, my glory spread by comrades. Below we shall see more fully how this reflects a difference between the Homeric and Virgilian conceptions of heroism. As another example of Virgil's use of Homer, when Aeneas arrives in Carthage, he is greeted by this scene. There is a spot where at the mouth of a long bay an island makes a harbor forming a breakwater, where every swell divides as it comes in and runs far into curving recesses. There are high cliffs on this side and on that, and twin peaks towering heavenward impend. On reaches of still water, over these, against a forest backdrop shimmering, a dark and shaggy grove casts a deep shade, while on the cliffside opposite below the overhanging peaks there is a cave with fresh water and seats in the living rock, the home of nymphs. Here never an anchor chain, never an anchor's biting fluke need hold a tired ship. Here is Homer's description of Odysseus's first glimpse of Ithaca. There on the coast a haven lies, named for Phorcys, the old god of the deep, with two jutting headlands, sheered off at the seaward side but shelving toward the bay, that break the great waves whipped by the gales outside, so within the harbor ships can ride unmoored. Whenever they come in mooring range of shore, at the harbor's head a branching olive stands, with a welcome cave nearby it, dank with sea mist, sacred to nymphs of the springs we call the Naiades. These are similar descriptions, but the comparison only serves to emphasize the enormous differences in circumstances. When Odysseus sees this scene, he knows his Nostos is nearing completion. For Aeneas, Carthage is not home, though he will be tempted to treat it as such. The greater history that begins in Book 7 is a reworking of the Iliad, focusing on the war between the Latins and the Trojans, and ending with the invading Trojans triumphant. As in the Iliad, the conflict originates as a dispute over a woman. Lavinia plays the role of a new Helen. Like the Iliad, Aeneid 7-12 employs the absent hero structure. With Aeneas gone from the field, Turnus is on the verge of defeating the Trojans, but Aeneas returns to battle just in time to win the day. Shortly after, Turnus kills Pallas, a young warrior under Aeneas's protection, and Aeneas battles Turnus to avenge Pallas's death. As Achilles entered the battle in reaction to the death of Patroclus, Virgil's style in the second half of the Aeneid, full of epic similes, Aristeia, and grisly descriptions of death and battle, mimics the Iliad. In more subtle ways, too, the second half of the Aeneid is Virgil's Iliad. As in Homer's first epic, women are almost wholly absent from books 7-12. The only women who have prominent roles are Amata, Lavinia's mother, who goes into a frenzy when she learns that her daughter is to marry a Trojan, and Camilla, an Amazon warrior, both women in short, who do not behave like women. This is in striking contrast to the Odyssean half of the Aeneid, which includes a very full characterization of Dido. Though the two halves of the Aeneid generally match Homer's epics, Virgil does not handle these parallels in a mechanical fashion. On the one hand, there are Iliadic features in books 1-6. In Book 2, Aeneas tells Dido about the Trojan horse and the fall of Troy, and Book 5 describes the funeral games for Aeneas' father, Anchises, which parallel the games for Patroclus in Book 23 of the Iliad. On the other hand, the whole Aeneid has an Odyssean plot. Aeneas, like Odysseus, is on a journey and faces a hostile reception when he arrives at his destination, but overcomes his enemies and wins a bride. When we get to Book 7, we shall examine the Odyssean features of Virgil's Iliad more fully. There are more profound transformations of Homeric epic as well, many of which reflect Virgil's historical situation. We know almost nothing about Homer or his times, but Virgil's lifetime, 70 through 19 BC, covered a crucial period of European and world history. Before the Aeneid, Virgil had gained a literary reputation by writing the Eclogues and the Georgics, both poetic celebrations of the quiet life of the Italian countryside. The Aeneid is a very different kind of poem, and this difference reflects a profound historical shift. During most of the 1st century BC, the Roman Republic was racked by a series of civil wars. Julius Caesar triumphed over Pompey and established a kind of imperial rule, but he was assassinated in 44 and again civil war broke out. Chaotic times made a retreat to a simpler life attractive to many Romans, even if it took place only in the imagination or a poem. The century of misery was brought to a decisive end by the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, where Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, defeated Antony and took sole control of what was now an empire. Octavian was made Augustus, and a period of comparative peace and calm followed, known as a Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Sorry, that was Hank, our dog. Okay. It was during Augustus's reign that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Luke 2:1. Virgil died before Christ's birth and probably knew little of goings-on in Palestine. But the rise of Augustus filled Virgil and many other Romans with hope for a peaceful and prosperous future for Rome and the world. Already in the 4th Eclogue, Virgil had written of the birth of a child who would rule a world at peace and usher in a golden age in which, according to Virgil, the cattle shall not fear the lion. St. Augustine, the Christian bishop of Hippo in North Africa, later said that Virgil was speaking about Christ, and throughout the Middle Ages, Virgil was considered a near-Christian poet. For Christians, Virgil was, for this reason, a superior figure to Homer. Wherever Virgil got this idea, and whatever he meant by it, the Aeneid shows that he saw Augustus as a kind of a messianic ruler, a saving king. The several descriptions of Rome's future in Virgil's epic climax with the reign of Augustus. During Aeneas's visit to the Elysian fields in Book 6, Anchises shows him the souls of the future heroes of Rome, Augustus prominent among them. This is the man, this one, of whom so often you have heard the promise, Caesar Augustus, son of the defied, who shall bring once again an age of gold to Latium, to the land where Saturn reigned in early times. Much Greek literature looks back to a better time. For Hesiod, the Golden Age was lost in the past, never to be recovered, and Homer frequently comments on the superiority of the ancient heroes to people of his own day. Virgil, living in the first flush of the Roman peace, wants us to look ahead. In his idolatry, Virgil places Rome and its emperor, rather than the church and her sovereign, at the center of world history. The Aeneid, then, is a patriotic epic celebrating the greatness of Rome. It is a compliment to Virgil's patron, Augustus Caesar, and Rome's political history is alluded to in many episodes. Aeneas's troubled relation with Dido is connected with the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage, and Aeneas's conquest of Italy and his defeat of Turnus foreshadow the eventual triumph of Augustus, who brought an end to the century of civil war. Yet, though Virgil is a patriotic Roman, he is also profoundly aware of the costs of Rome's imperial expansion. Wherever Aeneas goes, sorrow and death follow. Dido commits suicide when he leaves her, and when Aeneas arrives in Italy, he has to battle Turnus. This is made all the more poignant because Dido and Turnus are, for many readers, more likable and human characters than Aeneas himself. The poem ends on a distinctly odd note, with Aeneas thrusting his sword into the fallen Turnus. This has led some scholars to suggest that Virgil was not really celebrating Augustus at all, but subtly criticizing his ruthless methods and the Roman exploitation of conquered peoples. It is unlikely that this was Virgil's intent. One indication of his favor for Rome is found in his depiction of non-Roman peoples and ways. Modern readers are probably more attracted to Dido than Virgil's first readers would have been, who might well have associated Dido with the real-life African queen who had so recently figured in Roman history, Cleopatra, who allied with Antony in the struggle against Octavian. Like most Romans, Virgil preferred the simplicity of King Evander's hut, Book 8, to the more than oriental splendor of Dido's temple and palace. Throughout the poem, Virgil, unlike Homer, describes the conflict of Greece and Troy as one between Europe and Asia. Though the Asiatic Trojans are the founders of Rome, they can be so only after undergoing a profound transformation. We need to inspect the nature of this transformation further before being able to understand Virgil's political stance. The transformation from nostalgia to the Roman emphasis on the future takes place in Aeneas himself. Through the first 5 books, Aeneas is an Odyssean hero, weeping for home, and the tragedy is that he has no home to weep for. Book 6 is a transitional book in this respect, as in so many others. The Sibyl of Cumae leads Aeneas through the underworld, and Anchises shows him the future greatness of Rome. This so fires Aeneas' imagination and zeal that when he emerges from the realm of the dead, he has truly left old Troy behind and accepted his destiny to found a new Troy. Now he can say, "Let the dead bury their dead." This change in the outlook of Aeneas is part of a larger transformation of heroic ideal. We've already seen 2 styles of heroism in Homer. Achilles represents an extreme example of the heroic ideal of pursuing personal glory and reputation. Odysseus is as concerned about glory as Achilles, but his means for achieving it are very different. Odysseus is a cunning hero who adopts disguises, tells lies, and endures suffering and insults, biding his time until he can string his bow. In certain respects, Aeneas is similar to both Achilles and Odysseus. Like Achilles, he can be a savage and merciless warrior. And like Odysseus, he is a suffering hero. But Aeneas is not Greek, but Trojan, and on his way to becoming a Roman. Like Hector, he is more concerned with protecting his community than with personal glory. The poem of the Odyssey mentions that Odysseus is a prince striving to bring a whole fleet of ships back to Ithaca. But by the time he appears in the epic, all his men are dead, and he returns to Ithaca utterly alone. Aeneas could not consider this a successful enterprise. His mission is to found a city. Aeneas suffers because so hard and huge a task it was to found the Roman people. His sufferings are the labor pains of Rome's birth. Aeneas, like Achilles, is concerned with glory, but the conception of glory is affected by the forward-looking character of the epic. In Roman legend, Aeneas was the one who bridged Troy and Rome, but the founding of the city actually took place some 300 years after Aeneas, with Romulus and Remus, and the full glory of Rome did not emerge until Augustus. Aeneas is destined to die shortly after reaching Italy and defeating the Latins. Jupiter tells Venus in Book 1 that after subduing the Rutulians, a native people of Italy, he'll pass 3 summers of command in Latium, 3 years of winter quarters, before his son Ascanius takes his place. Thus he is founding a city that he will never see and helping to achieve glory for a people who will not live until many generations later. He is Father Aeneas, the founder of a race. Aeneas is more Abraham than Achilles. In keeping with his different mission, Aeneas has heroic qualities different from either Homeric hero. He is neither swift, nor a man of twists and turns, nor Polymedes. Instead, his outstanding heroic quality is pietas, the Latin word that is the source of our English word piety. This word, however, meant something quite different for Virgil than it does for us. When we say someone is pious, we mean he is devoted to God. But the word often carries a connotation that the pious person is unconcerned about the rough business of public life, fighting wars, administering justice, founding cities, and so on. For the Romans, and for Christians at least until the time of the Reformation, piety meant devotion to one's duty, whether to God or to others. pious person is one who fulfills the responsibilities imposed by his position or his destiny, and these responsibilities normally have public and political dimensions. Aeneas's famous escape from Troy provides a visual summary of his pietas. Carrying his father on his back, leading his son Ascanius or Iülus by the hand, and bearing the gods of Troy, Aeneas begins his journey to a new city. The fact that he carries the gods and the fact that they are gods of the old city indicate that for Aeneas and Virgil the religious and public dimensions of pietas are inseparable. In the ancient world, cities, including Rome, were religious as well as political organizations. Every city had at least one patron god or goddess, and sometimes the name of the city was derived from the deity, for example, Athens from Athena. If he is going to be found a new Troy, he must bring the gods of Troy with him. To be founder of a city, Aeneas must also be a priest. Pietas also requires proper respect for the fathers, and Aeneas literally bears the burden of the past as he leaves the burning city behind. His relationship to his father is a key issue, especially in the first half of the Aeneid. Anchises represents the past, but he is also constantly urging Aeneas to embrace his future. Thus pious Aeneas leaves Troy, holding the hand of his son, representing his future, and this too is an aspect of pietas. In this respect, pietas is connected with the theme of fatum, fate or destiny. Though still a religious idea in Virgil, fate has also become a political idea. Aeneas is fated to be the founder of a people, and Rome is fated to be great. Aeneas is initially reluctant to pursue his destiny, and throughout the early books he looks nostalgically back to his old home. Through his experience in Carthage and in Book 6, he becomes reconciled to his destiny. Only then does he really take Iülus by the hand and lead him forward. Opposition to fatum is called furor. In a general sense, this word means madness or frenzy, and it can take various forms. Passionately in love with Aeneas, Dido is full of furor, and Turnus, gripped by lust for slaughter, is possessed by a madness for war. They are mad not only because their emotions and actions are excessive, but also because they resist Aeneas's fated destiny. Furor turns those it possesses against fate and tempts them to neglect their responsibilities. Furor, in short, breeds impetus, or maybe it's impietus. If Aeneas is to remain pious and achieve his destiny, he must resist furor in all its forms, even when it resides within himself. He must master his passion for Dido, and he must subordinate his battle rage to the purposes of fate. The conflict between pietas, fatum, and furor also takes place at the divine level, where Juno represents the overwhelming power of madness. She inspires Dido's love for Aeneas and sends a fury, Alecto, to stir Turnus into a hysteria for war. In each case, her aim is to resist the destiny that Jupiter has decreed for Aeneas. There is yet another front in the war between furor and pietas. In Book 1, Juno gets Aeolus to stir up a storm, which is a natural symbol of furor. Neptune calms a storm, and in the first simile of the epic, Virgil compares Neptune's action to a political act. When rioting breaks out in a great city and the rampaging rabble goes so far that stones fly and incendiary brands, for anger can supply that kind of weapon. If it so happens they look round and see some dedicated public man, a veteran, whose record gives him weight, they quiet down, willing to stop and listen. Then he prevails in speech over their fury, by his authority, and placates them. Just so the whole uproar of the great sea fell silent, as a father of it all, scanning horizons under the open sky, swung his team around and gave free rein in flight to his eager chariot. A Roman of Virgil's time would undoubtedly have recognized Augustus in that public man who subdues the riot of civil war. For Virgil, the Roman peace was not merely a political achievement, but a cosmic event, depending on the conquest of furor impious, unholy furor. Thus the Aeneid plays out the conflict of piety and madness as several interrelated levels. There's a chart of the levels on page 224, and I will take a picture and just add it here. As we shall see below, Virgil develops his conflict in ways that reflect his complex evaluation of Rome's imperial achievement. Yet from what we have said, it's clear that Virgil believes that Rome's enemies, Carthage and the Italians, challenged Rome because of their mad opposition to fate. Though these enemies have a certain nobility, they are not pious. If they were, they would submit to Rome without a struggle. Especially at the divine level, this conflict and its resolution form one of the structural principles of the Aeneid. In Book 1, Juno deliberately opposes the will of Jupiter, and she initiates another attack on Aeneas in Book 7. In Book 12, she finally submits to Jupiter's will, a happy resolution that Jupiter meets with a smile. Furor is defeated on Olympus, and shortly after, Aeneas triumphs over the madness of Turnus. Jupiter's smile also links this scene with Book 1. While Juno is stirring up the storm at sea, Aeneas' mother, Venus, flees to Jupiter to ask him to confirm her son's destiny. Jupiter smiled at her, the father of gods and men, with that serenity that calms the weather. And he goes on to assure that Aeneas will found an empire without end. The entire Aeneid is played out between Jupiter's two smiles. From a Christian perspective, it is important to notice that Juno, with all her passion and rage, remains at Jupiter's side at the end of the epic. Like Homer, Virgil believes that there is furor in heaven, and this makes his hopes for peace on earth a mere fantasy. Only a worldview in which heaven is a place of peace and harmony is capable of offering a true gospel of ever-increasing government and peace. Aeneas' situation also forms an important framing device. When we first see him in the midst of Juno's storm, he feels his knees go numb and slack. The Latin here is solvuntur frigor membra. His members were dissolved with cold. These very words are repeated in the final lines of the poem, but there they refer not to Aeneas' fear, but to the death of Turnus. As Aeneas plunges his sword into his enemy, Turnus' body, according to Fitzgerald's translation, slackened in death's chill. But in Latin, this is the same phrase as found in Book 1. Fearful Aeneas, wishing for death, in the face of Juno's furor, has become triumphant Aeneas, defeating the fury of his Italian rival. Moreover, the location of Aeneas' conflict with furor changes over the course of the epic. Books 1 through 6 focus on Aeneas' conflict with his own furor, his passion for Dido, his despair and self-pity when things go wrong, his wish to return to Troy. If Aeneas is to achieve his destiny and face the dangers of founding the Roman people, he must become wholly pious. Having gained control of his own passions, Aeneas is prepared for the external conflict that dominates books 7 through 12, in which Aeneas battles not his own furor but the madness of Turnus. The links between books 1 and 12 are part of a larger concentric structure. See the introduction to Epic above, one that overlays the Odyssey-Iliad arrangement of the epic. We have already noted that books 1 through 7 are linked by the invocation of the Muse. Brooks Otis has pointed out that the two books are roughly arranged in reverse order. Book 1 moves from chaos to calm, while Book 7 moves from peace to war, and in both cases, Juno plays a prominent role. Book 1, Juno's anger at Aeneas, storm at sea, Neptune calms sea. Book 7, Aeneas arrives peacefully in Italy, Juno stirs up Amata and Turnus, war between Trojans and Latins. Otis goes on to suggest a more comprehensive outline of the epic. A. Book 1, Juno's storm calm. B. Book 2, defeat of Trojans. C. Book 3, wandering of Aeneas. D. Book 4, tragedy of Dido. E. Book 5, funeral games. F. Book 6, journey to the underworld. A. Book 7, peace, Juno, war. F. Book 8, Aeneas and Evander. E. Book 9, night raid of Nisus and Euryalus. D. Book 10, death of Pallas. C. Book 11, war with Latins. B. Book 12, Victory of Trojans. A. Juno's Reconciliation. Some correspondences are more obvious than others, but there are a sufficient number of striking parallels to suggest that Virgil consciously arranged his story as Otis suggests. Book 12, which describes a Trojan victory on foreign soil, reverses a Trojan defeat on their own soil, recounted in Book 2. Dito's death in Book 4 matches the death of the young warrior Paulus in Book 10. In Books 5 and 9, Nisus and Euryalus play prominent roles, and in both, the Trojan ships are threatened by fire. Books 6 through and 8 contain prophetic glimpses of the future glories of Rome, the first coming from Anchises and the second depicted on Aeneas' shield. Aeneas' relationship with Italian king Evander, Book 8, furthermore recalls his relationship with his dead father, Book 6. According to this arrangement, the key transition comes as Aeneas passes through the underworld. Even more than in the Odyssey, Aeneas' death and resurrection transform the hero into a new man. Further correspondences will be noted as we examine each section. On his deathbed, Virgil asked the executors of his estate to destroy the unfinished manuscript of the Aeneid. Generations of schoolchildren have cursed Augustus for overturning Virgil's will and refusing his dying request. But the request itself is a puzzle. Had Virgil realized that he had not equaled Homer? Was he dissatisfied with his creation? Had he become disenchanted with Augustus, whom he had celebrated in the poem? Did his epic perhaps subtly criticize Augustus, something he now regretted? Whatever the reasons, the fact is that the Aeneid, like its hero, was rescued from the flames and founded a literary tradition that stretches from the 1st century BC through Dante and Milton and into the 20th century.